Okay, alrighty. My name is Lisette Coly, and I'm the Executive Director of Parapsychology Foundation. And I'm very pleased to be here this morning on August 5th, 2001, following the 44th Annual Conference of the Parapsychological Association that PF hosted with Dr. Robert Vanderkessel, who is a longtime friend and associate of Parapsychology Foundation and an early grantee of our founder, Eileen Garrett. And both the administration of the foundation and personally the Garrett Coly family is particularly fond of him, and so we're very pleased to be sitting down this morning. So I'd like you, Dr.
Delighted to be here.
That's great, that's great. Could you tell me a little bit about your present affiliation or what you're currently doing?
Well, I retired from the University of Virginia Health Sciences Center about 7 years ago, so I'm now technically Professor Emeritus from there. I do some teaching at a local community college, do a course occasionally on parapsychology, on dreams sometimes, and 1 year did one on angels, so I'm sort of the resident flake for the community college program.
A very erudite flake, I'm sure. Can you tell us a little bit about your educational background and how you got into parapsychology?
I did my undergraduate work at Syracuse University. Master's was at University of Missouri, and doctorate was at Chapel Hill, the same place that Dr. Tart got his degree from. So we're both.
Were you matriculating at the same time?
I was actually a year ahead of Charlie, I think, at Chapel Hill on that. So my interest in parapsychology got sparked sort of when I was in the service, which was a number of years ago, back in '47. And I'd read one of Ryan's books, and it just seemed very intriguing to me. It was his very sort of first one. I thought, gee, this is really good stuff. I hadn't had any kind of background for it before. There's nothing in the family about any psychic stuff or whatever. I just thought, gee, this guy seems to be onto something. So as an undergraduate there at Syracuse, we had a course on abnormal psychology, and the guy did a lot of work on hypnosis. And so I'd every once in a while raise my hand and ask a question about Ryan's book, and he just kept dissing it, like, oh no, that's
And this would have been 47 around, yeah?
I had now started in Syracuse, in '47.
Roughly, uh-huh.
Enrolled there, and so it was just like, it was absurd. He didn't want to talk about it. I felt this guy was very judgmental that my grade would be affected and so on. But I still couldn't stop from putting up my arm every once in a while and just asking about these questions, because it seemed to me this guy was totally ignoring them. So I had a chance. I had a Quaker instructor there, and he's sort of in the idea. The Quakers kind of, when they want to have things happen, kind of go up to the top. He knew of my interest in parapsychology and had written a letter to J.B. Ryan saying, I have this student here who seems to be interested in the field. Maybe you could, send him a letter. So I got this letter from J.B. Ryan, and it was just so overpowering for me to think that, little old me, and here's this letter from Dr. J.B. Ryan at the Duke Parapsychology Laboratory, little old me, insignificant nothing as an undergraduate. And I was just so touched by that, and I felt like, wow, Ryan was contacting me, and dear Bob, so he had a trailing case, a side trailing case of a dog for me. He said, could you look this up? There had been a dog. A couple had left to go down to Florida with a dog in the back of their pickup truck. So he got all the way down to Fort Lauderdale, made one Lance, fueling up. And then I think they went like about another 15 miles to where they were supposed to go. And they looked, and the dog wasn't there. And I was like, wow, what happened to the dog? Mm-hmm. So they looked around there a little bit, went back to the gas station. The guy said, yeah, there was a collie back around here about, 15, 20 minutes ago, but, I haven't seen him lately. So they put in some ads in the paper down there. Didn't show up. They drove back to Syracuse. Roughly about 8 months later, a collie showed up on the streets of Syracuse. Its hair all covered with, burdocks, and its paws all like the consistency of hamburger. And it looked like the dog was, somehow had been on a mission. And so they ran some publicity on it in the paper, and the dog was at the SPCA. And so they're inviting anybody who might know anything about the dog. And this couple, gee, maybe that's my dog. And they went out, and it was the dog, because this dog had totally ignored anybody else coming out. As soon as these people came in, up over the fence, went up and got on the front seat of the pickup truck where this dog had always been. They took it home, and it went to a particular place under the house where it had always gone. It had this habit of sort of knocking the newspaper out if you held it. So it seemed to be a fairly authentic case, and Ryan invited me down there to visit, and I reported on that dog trailing case. And I guess he liked the work I had done on it. So then I went for my master's degree to Missouri. And while I was there, he sent me another letter, sort of encouraging me, saying thanks for looking up that one case, appreciated what you did on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Would that have been in the beginning of all the animal psi work that somehow has fallen in
Carlos
love?
Osis, who used to be a research director, had been interested in that. Esther Foster was interested in it. So it was kind of at a time where the whole side trailing thing was of interest, and I think, I don't think it ever took on down there very much. Gaither Pratt did some work on homing pigeons down there.
Mm-hmm.
I was involved as a research assistant on that because the Navy was trying to find some way of, at sea, connecting where you couldn't intercept the code. So if you could put the message with a pigeon, it would fly from your ship to their ship, then the enemy couldn't intercept it. So they're trying to see.
The government's been looking into the applications of psi.
At that time, right. Office of
ago.
Naval Research was trying to investigate whether pigeons could actually do that. So we used to get up early in the morning and make all of these runs of releasing pigeons from the north, the south, the east, and the west, and recording the sun conditions and so forth to see how fast they could get back. So Ryan then, we struck up a little correspondence. My wife at that time, we did a little bit of ESP testing, a little bit of results, and Ryan was trying to encourage me, why don't you write it up, which I did. Then he gave me a grant for $300, which is a graduate student with a lot.
Was that a lot of money in those days?
Well, when I went there, yes, I was making $54 a month when I started. But the next year I moved all the way up to $75 a month. So a $300 grant went a long way. And I was then married and had 2 children as a graduate student. We were living in a little, sort of Victory Village kind of thing, where it was like, $40 a month for rent and so forth. So yeah, it was very much appreciated. So he invited me then to, come back to Missouri there. From Missouri, I'm sorry.
Back to the run.
Well, okay, there was a new thing that was opening up then. Let me sort of get my story unraveled here. So I left from Missouri. I went down to Florida, trying to take a job down there. Ryan kept up, and there was a guy down there allegedly doing work with animals. And since I'd done the side trailing one, animals were still kind of hot. This guy claimed he was able to get rats to go in and move, psychically you could move them to choose a particular, pellet and so forth. So I went down and I thought I would try and replicate that, see what I could do. The guy could never explain how it was done. He was Russian, he stuttered, so every time you try and talk to him, he would go and type. It turned out it was like a huge fiasco down there. This guy claimed he was doing all sorts of elaborate cancer research. He claimed he got these rats to smoke, and on the basis of the smoking, he got money from the Damon Runyon Cancer Fund for his smoking rats, which
I've heard of smoking guns, never smoking rats, but
well, these rats did not smoke. These rats did not do anything, but it was just a huge hoax because this guy was really exploiting the Damon Runyon Cancer Fund, and he was getting huge amounts of money. So one time they came down to investigate. So we now had to get 13 people dressed up in lab coats. So we got all of these undergraduate students because one of our research directors was an undergraduate in biology. And he told all of them, don't answer any questions. So it was this huge hoax. Everybody's got white coats on, pretending we're busy in this lab. And all he had in there was himself, me, and a part-time secretary, but trying to preserve this image as to legitimate research. So I got out of there and left and went up to Ryan's lab because he said, okay, well, sorry that didn't work out, but come on up here. So I went up there, and again, it was the usual question of funding, which has been our perpetual problem, as you all know, in parapsychology, trying to get adequate funds to be able to support people who are interested. And so your grandmother came down at that time. She came down for a visit. Had a chance to meet her. A very, very impressive lady.
What was your first impression? I know I asked Dr. Tart, not only professionally, a lot is written about her psychic supposed capabilities, but I'm interested specifically on an individual basis of the Eileen Garrett herself.
She was you could be overpowered by her because she would just sit there, sort of square her shoulders and look at you, and you felt like you were looking into the eyes of some very, very incredible force field. And she was big eyes and sort of watering, like just looking at you, like, So it was sort of a challenge.
Intimidating, or was she?
It could be. You could easily just felt like you could be, there was a film yesterday at the PA showing some work over in Japan, where the one master is sort of going into this posture, and then the person in the other one just gets smashed up against the wall from it. Somebody sent out the force from the master, like, bang, you up against the wall. And I felt if you didn't sort of ground yourself, yes, she could knock you up against the wall with just her psychic energy that way. Mm-hmm. But she had a wonderful smile, and there was a really endearing kind of quality to her. She had, I'd say, almost like a little flirtatious kind of quality, that there was something about her. There was a little twinkle in her eye. There was a little way she turned a phrase, and it kind of felt like, yeah, this lady is in touch with herself at all kinds of levels. There was a lot of deep.
Self-confident.
And, she was
in command of herself.
Yes, confidence personified. Confidence with a capital C. She was clearly there and very confident. And so I went there with Gordon Mangan, and she asked us, what we were doing, and we gave some idea of it. And she said, well, maybe she could help us out. And so she gave us a grant.
So Parapsychology Foundation would have been established. This is past 51 then at this point.
It had been in
So
existence
it's the
at that point 2 years. So this was 48 years ago that she came down. So that recently you and I had some correspondence on that, and you asked me, did I have any old letters?
Yes, you were very generous to share with us, and they will.
So that was amazing. I went back,
archives.
and there was some letters back there dating back 48 years ago with Mrs. Garrett. And they're always very warm, very sensitive. How are you doing? I hope things are going well. So there was a little bit of conflict with J.B. Ryan over the administration of the funds that isn't really administrative details that somehow Ryan took a different interpretation than what your grandmother had taken on it, which was to our disadvantage. It was very much in his way of viewing that money was more for him than it was for us, etc. So your grandma and him had a little bit of conflict over it, but I was always extremely grateful, because just as the 300 from Ryan had made a huge difference as a graduate student, by now I had 3 children, and so things were extremely tough. And so in addition to getting the grant from your grandmother that I was so pleased in touch with, she one time said, well, I think someday, you're going to come to your own in parapsychology. I believe in you. I want to support you. And she knew that I was struggling financially. She said, tell you what, you send me a list of all your bills. You just round them all up and send them to me. So there was a Sears bill, and there was some money I'd borrowed from a brother-in-law, and some money I'd borrowed from somebody else.
Personal bills, then, not experimental bills.
No. These
personal
were just
obligations
these were
that you're
Bob.
mounting.
These were Bob bills. Had nothing to do with research grants. Had nothing. This was just Bob as a struggling graduate student with 3 kids, just about up to here, almost going to go under for the 3rd time.
Yeah.
Just send me all of your bills. They were about $1,100 worth, and I sent them up to her, and then we had a wonderful ceremonial fire. We just took, got a little fire going. We put in, here's the Sears bill, here's this bill, here's this bill, and as they all went up in smoke, it was like this incredible load had been lifted from me, because I was really bogged down. Like, how am I going to make ends meet? I got 3 kids. My wife was staying at home with the kids because we felt that was her role, and I felt so grateful that I'd had 3 sons before that, and not too long after that there was another 4th son that came along. So I always felt everybody should have your own first name. Middle names, you don't use that much. And so I was so grateful to your grandmother for what she had done, that when that next son came along, he was called Craig Garrett. So that each of my children have a middle name relative to somebody who is important. That Quaker instructor back at Syracuse who had first got me in touch with Ryan, his name was Whitney. So I have one that's Lance Whitney Vandy Castle, and then was Craig Garrett Vandy Castle. So I was always very appreciative, and then started to get some invitations to go over to some of the Parapsychology Foundation meetings overseas. Your grandmother was there, your mother was there, you were starting to become on the scene yourself, and it was just, I don't know, it was
so
like
it's a whole
family.
continuum.
Yeah, it's just, no, I mean, it's to see the remarkable linkage between you and your mom and your grandma. I mean, to see Earth Mother after Earth Mother after Earth Mother reincarnated. No, because you all are very
You're very kind, Bill. Tell me, we know, of course, of your career in parapsychology. Obviously you're very well known as a parapsychologist, but
I just want to acknowledge you all were very good to us.
Yeah, well, you've been very good to the field. And apart from parapsychology, I would say that perhaps you're very well known for your dream work. And I'm wondering, at what point did the dream work enter? I mean, parapsychology came first, and then the dream work was a natural extension, or how did that all work, Bob?
Well, at first it wasn't the logical extension. I had the interest in parapsychology. I was now out at University of Denver in a teaching position. And one time I had a graduate course I could teach on anything in clinical psychology. And so I asked the students, what would you like? And they said dreams. I said, geez, I don't know anything about dreams. I'd never really had any exposure as a graduate student back at Chapel Hill, a little bit of Freud. He said, no, we really want to do dreams. I said, but I don't know anything about dreams. You're not hearing me. He said, no, but we still want to do dreams. I said, okay, here's the deal. You guys read every week about dreams. You tell me what you've learned. I'll tell you what I've learned. And
This
so,
is on-the-job training,
yeah,
telling
no,
me.
so it was a wonderful...
Had there been a lot of work done on dreams prior to?
No, there's
Not
been
really?
a little bit of work in 1953. There was a big breakthrough study at Chicago as Zvinsky and Kleitman, where they first found if you put the electrodes on and measured the eye movement, you could tell when the person was having a REM period and when they're having a dream. And so that was just beginning to get assimilated
so it really
into the
was in
mainstream.
its infancy, dream work.
Yeah, at that point it was still quite new. So then I had a chance I was teaching these courses on personality testing. So I thought I could tell pretty much what the personality test was saying about people, but I didn't know about dreams. So now I administered to students various personality tests and then also collected dreams from them. And I found if I went through, I felt I was getting actually more material from the dreams than it was the personality tests. Then there was a chance to go and work with Calvin Hall, who at that time was probably considered the leading dream researcher in the country. So he had done a lot of studies looking at the content of dreams. How do men differ from women in the way that they dream? And so I spent a couple of years with him down in Florida, and we came out with a book called The Content Analysis of Dreams, where we could go through and score up dreams in terms of what kind of setting. Is it indoor in the office here at the Parapsychology Foundation? Is it outside in Central Park? Are there men? Are there women? Are there TV cameras? Are there books? Etc. What sort of things are in dreams? Then we could get norms on those. So we had 1,000 dreams, and we could see were 500 male dreams, 500 female dreams. In what ways did they differ, and give you precise statistics on exactly how they would differ. So then Monty Ullman came down, and he was going to start up a dream laboratory up in Brooklyn, trying to look at telepathic dreams. And so he was trying to recruit someone for this position up there. Gardner Murphy, who had been a former president of the American Psychological Association, had given him some money for it. He was now looking to try and get somebody for that spot. He knew I'd had background in parapsychology. I was down with Calvin Hall. I had the interest in dreams. Maybe I might be able to be enticed up there. Well, I had a job down there in Florida where we didn't go to work until noon. We'd go down on a little Vespa to the beach, sit under a palm tree, score up 50 dreams, swim a little, sit under the palm tree, do another 50 dreams.
Not so shabby.
Wasn't a bad day, as opposed to going up with all of the dog droppings up in Brooklyn. So it was really not much of a choice as to which way I was going to go. But Monty sort of worried Calvin that maybe I might possibly go with him. So one night I was there in the lab, and we had a grant from the National Institute of Mental Health, which usually has to go to a university, but Calvin had such a reputation, they gave it to him personally. So we were trying to look at what's the difference between dreams at home and dreams in the laboratory, and how do dreams change from one REM period to another, to another, to another during the night. So we began our own subjects for it, so we could experience it firsthand. So one night I had a dream. I was just in a city, someplace, big, busy city, and all of a sudden I just felt impelled to walk over in the basement of this building. And as I walked in the basement, there was a boxing match going on. And these guys were really slugging out, and one guy was really getting clobbered. So I sort of identified with him as the underdog, and I was throwing all these imaginary punches. When Calvin came in to wake me up for the dream, it turned out, he didn't tell me that he was going to do this. He had been trying to send a message of the Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, fight with Sonny Liston down there. So he had been in there by the EEG machine doing all of the same silent punching that I had been doing in the dream. So he was startled, I was startled. Then the next night, I was in the lab, I had a dream we're sitting at some, table taking a test for a Fulbright scholarship. There is no such thing as a test for it, but it was like...
Some sort of an...
Yeah, it was just an analogy for it. So there's a big picture up on the wall of a skiing scene. It just came like floating down. That's the answer to the $64,000 question. I knew that somehow that was terribly important, the skiing picture. So I said, okay, we can all take a break. Walked out again, big city. In the middle of this huge, big metropolitan center was a big mountain of snow, and there was a ski tow taking skiers up and skiers coming on down. And then when I told him that, he was like, startled, because that's what he had been trying to send me that night, was a skiing picture. And so to get these two back to back so strongly really kind of...
I've heard you referred to as what, the Prince of Percipients? Is what at some point in your career?
Right. So eventually I did wind up at Maimonides, not as a result of that visit from Monty, but because I'd been fairly successful working with Kelvin Hall. So later on they recruited me up to come to Brooklyn. I would come up there. Oh, I went up about 8 times, go up about a month apart, 6 weeks apart. And so I was come up here for a one-night stand in Brooklyn to be the dreamer. So I'd go over to Maimonides, and that was my sole purpose, to come up to get the electrodes attached and try and dream about the picture. And so what they were using in working life, I'm only modestly, not even that successful as an ESP side. But it seems somehow when I can get into the altered state of dreaming, and I think that's in the hospital have been looking at trying to transmit or send. So I'd go through and I'd try and say, well, I had a lot of aggressive dreams last night. I'll give this one here, my number 1 rank. Just it's a little aggressive. So you'd rank all 8 pictures. The criterion that they used was if you gave it a rank of 1 to 4, and that corresponded to the target picture, it was called a hit. If you gave it a rank of 5 to 8, it was called a miss. Using that kind of criteria on 8 nights out of 8, I got a hit. So it wasn't always precisely a Polaroid reproduction of it, because sometimes amongst the 8 pictures there'd be some that would be extremely similar. So it'd be difficult to say which one. Like one night I knew for sure it involved a black person, because black ethnicity came really strongly through in the dream. But in that target pool of the 8, there were 3 different pictures with blacks in it. So which one is the most of that? So I was fairly successful there, and then that led to some other research with dream telepathy and that. So I would say in my waking life I'm only modestly, not even that successful as an ESP side. But it seems somehow when I can get into the altered state of dreaming, and I think that's clearly where parapsychology needs to put a lot more focus, is into altered states. So just doing studies where we're kind of interacting with each other from the conscious mind to the conscious mind, I think is not, in my opinion, where the payoff. No. I don't think at all. Just going conscious to conscious.
Well,
you get some stuff, but not very much.
This leads me to ask you, and you've already started, as to what is your current feelings about current parapsychology? Are there any regrets as looking back of roads not taken, or hopes for the future for the field? Where would you like to see us be realistically? Where we'll might wind up, or where on your wish list where you'd like to see the field go? I know you were a past president of the Parapsychological Association.
At one time I've been a past president. I realized the other day I was talking with Stan Krippner, and that it's one linkage between the two of us. We both have been the president of the Parapsychological Association. We've both been the president of the Association for the Study of Dreams. There's no 2 other people who can make that joint claim. I would say we've just been so afraid of really facing what psi is about. My opinion is most parapsychologists are really closet goats. They really don't want to be touched and affected by it. As long as they're doing, significance, at the 05 level and it doesn't get too close to home, they're comfortable. Then they can feel like they're brave people out in the frontier, out in the cutting edge of scientists. I don't go where the rest go out there. I am one of those. I'm the Christopher Columbus of this. I sail into uncharted waters. I put up this flag in brand new territory. Admire me because I am so resolute in my fierce independence, and I am out there to be admired for my risk-taking behavior to go against the mainstream and be out here. But let them get bit in the fanny with a direct experience of parapsychology, and they run faster than the average person in the street, because the average person in the street doesn't have that much investment. They sort of roll with the punches a bit more. I don't think this seems kind of crazy with me, but it doesn't really affect them. But now you've sort of put your career on the line to say, I am a parapsychologist. I'm one of these brave, creative people who are out there. And now you get something that comes that close to home, and it's like now you're chunking your whole professional career.
You got a lot on the line.
You got a lot on the line. And so it's like, wow, when this stuff impacts you, it really takes and hits you with a 2x4. It's a real cosmic 2x4 blow, and it really sends them running. So you'll recall many years ago over in London, gave a paper about dissociative phenomena. The Parapsychology Foundation was having this symposium in London on clinical states in the relationship to ESP. So I was presenting on the basis of multiple personality disorder and dissociation, and saying that in the process of working with a woman with multiple personality disorder, I had been confronted. I encountered more paranormal phenomena in a 2-month period of time than I had in a quarter of a century before that. So I had been going to the PA fairly regular. I knew most of the parapsychologists. I had been successful as the dream telepathy subject, so I'd had some direct experiences. I was not a stranger to it as either a scientist or as an experiencer. So both ways I'd been on both sides of the electrodes. I put the electrodes on, I had the electrodes put on me. So I was like, I have to admit, in the beginning, I was kind of blown away, because with multiple personality, there can frequently be a part, perhaps, or maybe some external entity that claims to be there. In this case, it claimed to be an external entity who claimed to be an angel. And so it was a really fascinating experience to spend an hour or two looking at someone who looks the same as they did the day before, the hour before, but now there's an entirely different voice, there's an entirely different look in the eyes, there's an entirely different energy involved. And I say, I would have, if stuff, if it had been you doing this interview and you got up and levitated and spun around the room a couple of times and sat down, I would have like, okay,
just
no big deal, because this was the kind of thing that I was saying with her. It was so powerful, the psychokinetic and the telepathic and the precognitive, telling me things very clearly that were going to be happening, things about my life that no one else knew. And so I was just kind of blown away initially, because presenting as an angel, and so an angel was, telling me about this.
So I remember you took a lot of flack for that paper, didn't you?
That would be an understatement.
Which
that
plays
would be
into
an
fear of
understatement.
psi
So,
and,
well, we had a former president of the Parapsychological Association, Ray White, who said that what we need to do is to find our own truth and to stand for it. And so that was sort of my concluding line. I know this may seem kind of strange, sort of far out, but I have to tell you, I've gone there. What I think this is sort of like is the going into the snake pit with all of the kind of adventure movies that we've seen, the
Lost
Indiana,
Ark or whatever,
Indiana Jones sort of thing, where you go into the mysterious caves and there's the snake pits and there's all of these things. You have to be willing to go in and confront the cave, the dragons, the monsters that are in it, because psi works at a very, very deep level, clearly at the unconscious or below. You have to get your hands dirty, and you have to be willing to go in and to look this thing in the eye. You can't go running away, because that's what happens. So many of them run away. But if you're willing to stand your ground and say, okay, no, I'm taking this on. I'm equal to this. Just as it was almost with your grandmother. I felt like she could have blown me away. She could have, psychically slammed me against the wall. But no, I was going to encounter that and look her in the eye and just feel like, okay, I'll take you on. I'll take your energy on. And you have to do that, I think, as I did when I had to look in the eyes here. There actually was a period of time where we had to go through an exorcism in that. That wasn't part of what I presented at that time. But there was a period of a 5-day exorcism that we had to do. And when she became, quote, possessed, it was one where I had to get 3 people to help me, because I was told by the, quote, angel, this would be too much for you to handle on your own. You're a powerful person, but this is more than just what you alone could take. You have to get at least 3 people coming out of a sense of love, total agape. There was one friend that I'd had a lot of interaction with over the years. I had invited him, and he came because he thought he was going to see like a freak show, like a sideshow. I said, no, you're not eligible, because I had the responsibility for these 3 people in my. So I was responsible for our physical health and our mental health. And when she would get possessed, you'd have to be very careful, because if there's any weapons around, you got to. I did get still have a little scar from one of the stab marks on it. But when she was possessed, I thought, I've got all of these people, physical and mental welfare in my hand. And I had to be willing to look into the eyes of what I thought was evil, and look in those eyes and say, no, I am not going to give you any power. And so what you had to do, I went to a priest to try and get some coaxing on how to do this. He said what you have to do is to love this entity to the point that it's willing to accept God, however that's defined. And so it would spit on me, and I'd just say, thank you for the saliva. No, I still love you. It would swear at you. I bless you for your swearing. So no matter what it did to try and test you, it was always, you came back with the response of love. I love you, I accept you, and now will you say the Lord's Prayer with me?
Sounds like profiles in courage to me, Bob.
Well,
for sure.
but so try and shrink that story. We got to it at the end of 5 days. But it was a very powerful experience. And so when people talk about exorcism, I don't treat that lightly. So I felt I had the encounter with the positive side, the angelic. I had the encounter with the demonic side on that. And so I feel I experienced parapsychology, or psi, in a very, very, very powerful way. Unlike anything with the kind of low-level, experimentation we do in the lab. In nature's lab is where it happens. Nature's laboratory, not in the
Proof is in the
ESP lab.
pudding, in the real living.
And so that's, if I were to be disappointed, Dr. Tart gave a talk yesterday at the parapsychology meetings where he was saying it's time to start acknowledging this spiritual component, that there's a certain percentage of parapsychologists who've had these encounters, but they've been too ashamed to admit them. So I've always been willing to, what you see is what you get. I was willing to acknowledge when I was a telepathic
Put yourself on
subject.
the line and,
This is kind of fantasies that went on for me. A lot of it was sexual fantasies that helped facilitate what was going on. So unless we're really willing to bite the bullet and say it as it is, I don't think we're going to, if we're going to be delusionary ourselves, then we can't really.
We're just perpetuating. We're just not going to move forward.
So I think if I were to say what my regrets are about the field, and I don't know how to turn this other belief system around. It's kind of right now it's sort of an individual differences. Some people are willing to stand up there and say, hey, I sweat, whatever. And others say, no, I don't perspire. Maybe the rest of you perspire, but I don't perspire. And so I think we have to be willing to acknowledge our humanness and our fears. I mean, that was fearful stuff in a way to do. But I felt through having gone through it, there was I had an acquaintance with the field that I never had, prior to that time. It enables me to view it totally different. It's turned me around such that I'm now a ministerial assistant at Unity Church. I get up and I like to talk about spirit, and I feel that clearly spirit is where it's at. Love is where it's at. Love is the bond, love is the connection, love is the glue that really makes it all together. And that's clearly what I was hearing from this, quote, angelic entity, that it really was love. And to get to know ourselves. So the three-part thing that she gave me, she said, you have to get to know yourself, which most parapsychologists, and other, I'm not trying to really pick on parapsychology, most of us don't really know ourselves. We don't really want to look in the mirror and see a little zit there, little something here. So we don't really want to look at ourselves. So we really need to look at ourselves. We really need to try and be of service, to others. And that really the universe operates on the love principle. So those were the three statements that she made to me that I took to heart. That anything I've read in any kind of mystical or training for, sublime experiences, those three I think are, bedrock in all of them, regardless of which particular approach to the divine, to the transpersonal that we take.
That's the message. Well, I think that's a very good point to perhaps close our interview today, because I want people to really resonate to that and get on board, roll up those sleeves, and go forward. So it's been a pleasure over the years, and Parapsychology Foundation very much likes to back winners, and in your case, we certainly have one. So thank you.
Bless you.
Hi there. I hope you enjoyed today's selection. My name is Lisette Coly, and I serve as president of Parapsychology Foundation. I hope you give us a like, and if you have a comment, then do so below, and we'll try and better serve you. Any suggestions are welcome. And we want to thank very much our loyal subscribers. This is a relatively new channel and a new venture for Parapsychology Foundation, so we very much appreciate your loyalty. And if you haven't decided to subscribe, maybe pretty please you could.